Actually, hold on one second.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Chad Hill, and I have Adam Stetzer here with me.
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here.
We're excited today to be talking about tracking, something that we've spent a lot of time on over the last couple years, pulling in lots of different information, and we wanted to go over all of it and make sure everyone understood where we pull data from and how we show it in the dashboard. So what I've done is I've put together a basic, for the most part, B2B funnel of where traffic comes from, and then ultimately where you want the traffic to go. So at the top of the screen here, I have 4 different sources of traffic: referrals, organic, direct traffic, pay-per-click traffic, all coming into a website. And in most cases, again, in a B2B lead generation or even a consumer lead generation type of website, we're looking for people to either call the business, fill out a lead form, or in some cases to maybe fill out an email newsletter so that they can be followed up and nurtured on going later on. I also have to the left a cloud where there's social media going on, and so that information might be places where people are talking about you on Twitter or Facebook. They aren't necessarily on the website, but it's also something that more and more people want to be tracking.
Right. So, Chad, do you have that out there because it's not as trackable? First of all, it's a great looking picture you've got here, but why is social media so disconnected from everything else?
Well, because in most cases, I think this will become evident here as we go through to the next part. Google Analytics really becomes the glue of how you track what's going on your website, where the traffic's coming from, what people are doing on your website. But if there is somebody tweeting about you or interacting with you on Facebook, that information is not flowing into Google Analytics because it's happening outside or off of your website. So I really wanted to get back to that in a minute when we talk about our social tab and how we pull data in from the social media sites. On the 2 reveals that I've done at this point, Google Analytics is really the best tool out there, 1, because it's free, and 2, because it's actually very robust and easy to set up compared to some of the other enterprise web analytics tools. But it provides a lot of information about where traffic's coming from and then what it's doing on your website. When you get into things like people who come to your website but call you, that's where Google Analytics actually isn't able to really connect to phone calls. So again, let's just walk through that scenario. You rank well on an organic traffic term. Someone comes to your website. They surf around on your website. All that information is very trackable with Google Analytics, how long they stayed, which content they actually looked at. But if they were compelled enough at that point to pick up the phone and call you, Google Analytics actually doesn't track through to the phone call. So one of the things that we've done, and we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, is we're allowing you to actually track phone calls that come from various sources. So people that come to your website from an organic source may see a phone number that when they call that number, it connects to the business, but we're able to pick up through HubShout that call came from an organic visit to the website. So that's very important. And the same is true for paid search. In many cases, people that come to your website, especially if you're one of the typical trade service businesses, may be looking to pick up the phone and call, not fill out a lead form. And so if you are only tracking the return you're getting from your paid search investment by looking at lead completions, form completions, you're missing a pretty big source of potential customers that may be calling your business. So phone tracking is therefore critically important.
Yeah, Chad, do we have any benchmarks on just what percentage of people prefer to pick up the phone versus fill out a lead form on a website?
It doesn't actually. I think it varies a lot between business to business. There are often cases where, and again, in a business where they're primarily are doing service-oriented business that it may be for every web lead there's 5 phone calls, and then when you have more of some of our B2B software providers, it's really the opposite, where they're for every 10 or 20 lead forms that are completed, they have 1 phone call. So there's quite a difference depending on the type of business, and that's why I think it's important to set this up. If you don't know how many calls you're getting from a source of traffic to the website, you really don't understand what the return is on any of the marketing investments or whether one is working better than another.
Interesting.
So the next part at the bottom of the chart here is our form completion. So the illustration here of this, with the check marks at the bottom, is someone who then goes to a page on your website, a contact form or an interview form that requests information, and then they submit it to your website. Again, Google Analytics is going to be able to pick up that goal conversion if it's set up properly. But there's a couple other things that we can add to the ability to get more insight than you might normally get from Google Analytics. The first one is our web to lead feature. So with HubShout, we give you the ability to actually put a form on your website that when someone completes that form, the data comes into HubShout as well as notifies the client on the account. So the nice thing about that is that you get more than just a number. Google Analytics is going to say you had 3 form completions, but what happens a lot of times is people say, well, I don't know if those 3 were good leads or bad leads. With HubShout and adding in web to lead tracking, you actually will know exactly whether they were good or bad. The other thing that we recommend is, especially with PPC conversion tracking, is that HubShout pulls information from AdWords and Ad Center to show the number of conversions that happen, and we recommend that you place the PPC conversion tracking tags on the confirmation page of any form on your website. And that's 2 extra services that we can pull data into HubShout by using those options. I also included a relatively new feature that we added when we built our email module, and that's the web to list feature. So if you don't want to actually have someone go through an entire lead form and complete a full lead form, we also do have a simple web to list option where you can put in your email address and simply have be added directly to a list, and then you can have that list be set up to be a monthly newsletter list, or it could be set up to be an autoresponder. And then, similar to the form tracking, we recommend here that you also plug in your PPC conversion tracking tags so that you also can count people who complete the web to list form as well. The final place that we're pulling data in for tracking purposes is over on the social media side. So again, because oftentimes that dialogue and those interactions are happening off the website, you don't have quite as much control over the trackability, but by using our social media monitoring service and setting up a search query that we monitor, we're able to bring back information from various social media sites, especially Twitter and Facebook, so that we can actually show that information right in HubShout. And then most importantly, all of this information is then used not only to populate the data on the dashboard, which we're about to talk about, but it also goes into the monthly reports. So this really was meant to sort of set up the next few slides that we're going to go through and talk about some of the more details around each of these different tracking options that we have and when you should use them and when you don't use them.
Awesome picture, Jed. It really shows how complex this stuff gets, though. And if any of the folks out there are new to our webinar series, I've been chatting with you in that little right-hand window while Chad's been talking. I'm sure this is generating questions, especially technical, on how you do some of this. Please pump your questions right into that window, and I'll feed them up to Chad as we go through the next couple of slides.
Okay, so let's spend a little bit more time talking about Google Analytics. As I mentioned in the previous slide, Google Analytics is by far the most diverse source, or captures the broadest set of information about what's going on your website. Again, it really captures information about where traffic's coming from, and then what that traffic's doing on your website. So we pull in information from Google Analytics every day. We pull in data like total visitors, visitors by source and medium, and then keyword information. We use that information on 2 places on the dashboard. One, on the Home tab, the top graph that shows total visits by month, both organic and non-organic traffic uses Google Analytics information, as well as the non-branded organic visits chart below it. Now, just so everyone knows, the non-branded organic visits, I think most people know that what we're doing is we're allowing you to set up in the admin area keywords that are typically branded searches, so the name of the business, so that when your client asks you, how's my campaign doing, you can actually look at this information and say, over time, we're seeing that the number of people finding your website with non-branded search phrases is going up. And the reason that's important is because a lot of companies are doing other advertising, and oftentimes that traffic comes to the website by already knowing their name. So they're coming looking for John's Pawn Shop or something, and from an ad or your sign they saw on the street or Yellow Page ad, whatever it might be, they're coming into the website knowing that business name. What we want to know is how many times are people now finding the business because they're searching for the category, and especially the keywords that we're working on optimizing. So that's non-branded organic visits. The other place we're using Google Analytics information is on the SEO tab. So again, we're using organic visits by month, and then also we have a traffic tab that actually pulls back all organic visits and then shows you what those keywords were and how many visits there were over time. And we're going to look at this information in just a minute once we go through the different sources.
Yeah, that non-branded traffic graph, Chad, is one of my favorite features in the software. It's new this year, I think, that we added it, but I know you've retained customers simply with that graph because they've been confused about traffic that's been generated from SEO versus just generically on their brand. And I'm kind of interested, I don't know if you want to share that story, but I'm interested also to know if any of the resellers listening have used that as a retention tool. Do their customers understand it? Do they feel equipped to explain it? Because to me, that's a very, very powerful graph.
Right. In the case where we had a client who called us, I'll share the story. We had a client who called us and said, I've been getting your reports every month, and I keep seeing that all of the traffic, the top search terms, the top terms that are bringing traffic to my site are my own keywords. And I looked, and that was true. They were, because, again, they were doing quite a bit of other advertising, as well as they had signs up near on the streets in different places. They were doing direct mail. They were doing email marketing. So there was a lot of advertising going on, and a lot of the traffic coming to the website was coming from those other advertising sources. But if you remove that traffic and you just graphed over time the number of people who were actually finding their website on the keywords they'd asked us to include in our optimization program, it had doubled or even tripled. Now, again, there was a lot of advertising going on, so as a percentage of their total traffic, it wasn't as high, but if you looked at probably what they were spending on the SEO and what it had done in terms of bringing in new traffic and new leads who were looking for their category of business, it was pretty impressive. And this was a company that was a custom home builder in the Washington, D.C. area. So you can imagine that for every 10 people looking to build a custom home in Washington, D.C., finding their website, those are big ticket items. So it doesn't take a lot of people that finding their website to say that this was a very powerful source of new leads for them that they just didn't see because they were looking at it. Well, they were looking at it in a way that they thought made sense, but really we believe you need to pull out the branded traffic to see the non-branded organic traffic, because that's really what we're all working on here with SEO.
Yeah, I love that story, and it also kind of says another thing. It's like even though you send these reports out, you sometimes have to take the client, sit them down, and say, I need to explain this to you because this is quite valuable, and here's the data, and it supports the idea that you really need to keep doing this. And in the story you just talked about, I believe that did retain the customer, and they're still with us. So that's great stuff.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is call tracking, and there are really three parts of call tracking, and it's important to sort of understand the difference so that you understand what we're doing across the board. The first thing that we're doing is we are providing tracking phone numbers, and tracking phone numbers, for all intents and purposes, are a commodity. And we hear it every day. A reseller calls and says, I'm already using this guy as my call tracking number provider, and we say, great. really what a call tracking number is pretty simple. You get an 800 number or you get a local business number, and you put a very simple routing rule that says when someone calls this number, just forward it on to this number, usually that being the business's primary number. So that technology, that part is pretty much a commodity. Now what we've tried to do is go out and find the cheapest provider of that service possible, because for the most part, all the other bells and whistles that most people add on, we're doing inside our software. So we just want to get the best, cheapest number possible that obviously when someone calls, it rings. There are a few other options that we do have the ability to actually record the calls, so that's important, and then other information like actually knowing where that phone call came from. But the tracking phone number is really a distinct standalone service. Where we do actually have made a selection in terms of picking our provider, we've actually had to do some work to integrate our software with their phone switch, essentially, or their database. So every day, if you get a phone tracking number through us, we're going out and we're actually pulling back the phone calls from the previous day, and then we're able to put those into the dashboard, which then also can go onto monthly reports. So whereas the first thing is a commodity, the second thing is something that we've done custom work on to actually hook up HubShout to another phone tracking provider. So when people call in and say, hey, I have my own phone tracking number, typically we're like, you can use it, it's fine, but if you want to show the information in HubShout, you have to use our phone tracking provider, because again, we can't do a custom API integration with every phone tracking company out there. There are literally hundreds of them. So that's the second part. The third thing that we've done is we've actually built a phone tracking script. And what that does is, in the case where you might have people coming to your website from multiple sources, you don't want all of them to get your tracking number, because sometimes people, so let's just say you decided that you want an organic search tracking number and a paid search tracking number. You're doing some SEO, you're doing some pay-per-click. And you want to be able to figure out how many phone calls do I get from Google versus how many phone calls do I get from my AdWords pay-per-click spend versus just to my regular business number. What we need to be able to do is actually know where the person's coming from so that we can actually change that number dynamically. And so what we built is a little piece of JavaScript that's, again, configurable through the dashboard, that what it does is every time someone comes to your website is it wakes up, or it is called and says, am I supposed to show a certain number? And it evaluates a few rules. Those rules are really twofold. One, it looks at, is there what's called a query string parameter override, or a query string parameter that tells me which number to use, and you can set up these rules in our system. And typically what that means is that from a paid search or from an email campaign, you control the link back to the client's website. So what we do is we add a little tracking parameter to that link that says, hey website, when you get this click, I want you to go look up this rule, pay-per-click or AdWords or whatever the rule name is, and go figure out what you're supposed to do. Typically that's look for a number on the website and swap it out to this number. So that's one way that it works. The second thing it can do is it can actually look at the referral source. So when you get traffic from an organic source like Google, you can't specify a specific URL from Google. Google decides what to do. Typically it's either to the home page or to an interior page, but you can't put, for example, a Google Analytics tracking script on your traffic that's coming in from an organic source. So what we do is we can look at, though, the referrer, so we know it's coming from Google or Bing or Yahoo, and we can have rules there that say if we get traffic from Google, Yahoo, or Bing, then I want you to look up this rule and make this change. Now, the other part of our phone tracking script is that when we look up and do that analysis, or we look at those rules and we evaluate the rules, we're also saving the result as a cookie, so that if someone came today from a paid search ad, but tomorrow comes back by searching for your name or your company organically, clicks on the ad, when they come to the website, it's going to say, hey, yesterday, or I have a cookie here that says I should be using this rule to change the number back to the pay-per-click number. So that way you're able to sort of keep track of someone who starts off from paid search, comes back with organic and calls you. You can source that call back to the paid search, which in most cases is what you want to do, because you're really trying to say, is my investment in paid search or my investment in Facebook advertising or email marketing, whatever other advertising you're doing, is it worth it? So those are the three parts of phone tracking, and you don't have to use. You can use the phone tracking script and not use our tracking numbers. Now, you won't be able to listen to phone calls in HubShout and see the number of calls in the graph, but you would be able to change the phone number on your website. You can also get a tracking number and just put that on your website or your landing page usually, and not use the phone tracking script. So when we talk about phone tracking, one of the things that you need to work out with your account manager until you're able to sort of do this yourself is what part of call tracking am I trying to do? What is my objective, and what things do I need to take into consideration when starting the setup of a call tracking for my client's campaign?
And Chad, I guess I have an interesting question on this. It seems to me there's a lot of resistance to setting up call tracking. Do you think that's because people are intimidated by the technical aspects of it, or they don't understand the value it will provide? What's your take on that?
I think there's a couple things that I've seen. One is that people are worried about who owns the phone number, and I think that's in some cases a valid concern, and you have to balance having, and the other concern is that sometimes people feel like their phone number is their brand. So, we have a few clients who actually, the name of their company has their phone number in it. So there's sort of a philosophical concern about, well, if the name of our company includes a phone number, do we really want to show a different phone number on the website? I think you have to balance both of those off of a need and desire to track. I think it's a lot more difficult to go to a meeting with a client and review the status of their account if you don't know the full picture of what they're getting out of their campaign. I reviewed a paid search account yesterday with one of our resellers, and if you took out the phone tracking, and didn't know how many phone calls they were generating from the campaign, the cost per conversion would have been double and in some cases triple. So the campaign would have been shut down without even a second thought. But when you added in the number of phone calls they were getting, all of a sudden the numbers, they didn't look perfect, but they looked a lot better than they did without that. So I think it's on a case-by-case matter or case-by-case basis, but it is a really important thing to know if you're trying to ultimately prove the return on investment of any of the online marketing campaigns that you're running.
Yeah, see, that's fascinating. I mean, here's a case you're describing where the program's actually working, but if they didn't have the right tracking on, they would not have reached that conclusion. And so that would be a big missed opportunity for this client, and don't think there isn't 5 competitors right behind them who are tracking and would be ready to gobble up that traffic. So I hear what you're saying about what I'll consider the edge cases of brand name includes the phone number. But let's assume that's a fairly small percentage of the world, particularly in the small business world. And I also think, Chad, the consumer behavior data supports the notion that phone numbers aren't what they used to be. People don't write them down in their little black books anymore. They use Google as their Rolodex, and they look things up real time, and they don't commit those to memory or paper. And so I think there is a little bit of an attitude that my phone number is important to be static that's probably a little bit dated, except for some of the cases you pointed out. And that's probably another place we're getting resistance. But to me, being able to prove the return on investment is the name of the game.
I agree. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is web to lead and web to list. Again, you don't have to use this feature, but the nice thing about it is that if you're using the web to lead service that we offer, you're going to have all of the data in one place. So you're going to be able to go into a meeting with a client or take a phone call from a client and be able to immediately pull up how many phone calls, how many visits they've gotten, how many web leads they've gotten. And that's really the name of the game, at least that we've found, is that when you're dealing with what we all hope to be a large Rolodex of clients, you want to be able to quickly gather information. And so one of the primary objectives that we've had in building the dashboard and the software that we've put together is being able to bring together all this information into one place so that it's more, so that we can provide more insight and that it's ultimately more actionable from a from sort of an evaluation analysis standpoint, and the ability ultimately to take action on the results that this is working, let's do more of it. This is not working, let's do less of it. So the way this works is that we can actually pull in, you can set up a web form that posts across from the client's website to your portal. So this information, if you were to open the source of the page, it's going to look like you're actually posting the information inside the form to your portal site. So again, HubShout's not disclosed there. That information comes into your portal, into the HubShout database, and then it either goes, if it's a web to lead, goes onto the sales tab, and then you have the ability to also now, with our web to lead service, also add it to a list, so that if, for example, you wanted to take information in, have someone else fill out a lead form, but also have them automatically enrolled in a nurturing campaign, that can be done right from a web to lead form now. And then the only difference between that and web to list is that if you have a newsletter sign up and you don't want them to also be counted as a sales lead, so if you, for whatever reason, have two calls to action, one is sign up for our newsletter and the second one is sign up to be contacted by sales. The first one, the sign up for our newsletter, could be a web to lead list, and that information would then just go directly from the form submission right into a list inside our email module, which you could then have configured to automatically kick off an autoresponder or just collect those names so that once a month you can send out your newsletter.
Yeah, this is really cool stuff, Chad, and I'm excited about it, especially because of our kickoff of our email platform and the tight integration. But I also know we've got resellers who have embraced this, and what's most exciting is to see them get it all hooked up and have people come through their website, fill out, get on the list, and then have phone calls, inbound phone calls as a result of those nurture emails that happen automatically. So there's some work to get this set up, but the return on investment is great, and to see our resellers using it themselves, then getting excited about it, that's one of the best things to me, because I know they'll then push it for their clients, because they'll be saying, hey, I do this, it works. Put in a few hours, get this thing set up, and then you're off to the races.
The last part that I wanted to cover was the social media monitoring, and what we do with social media monitoring, I covered it in the first slide, but we are pulling in information each day. We look at a query that you set up in HubShout. Again, the next step, we're going to go take a look at the dashboard, walk through each of these places, but you can configure what information you want to look for. And then we go out and we pull back instances or mentions of that keyword, that search phrase, on the various social media sites. Again, Facebook, Twitter, it pulls back information from several of the social bookmarking sites, as well as some of the blog search engines. All that information gets pulled back, and then we also get back a score. So if there's a positive or negative word in what's being said, that comes back as well. And then you have the ability to see not only the trend over time of how many mentions you're seeing for that search query, but also whether or not they were positive or negative and what source they came from. So that's what we're doing with social media monitoring. And we've definitely seen that when you kick off a social media campaign, and we're doing this more and more now as we kick off social media campaigns for clients, that this really is a really important metric. It's just to say how much activity for their business is going on out on the social media outlets. And you can see this trend line. In fact, the graph I'm showing here is actually one where we had a pretty active campaign earlier in the year, and then you can see once that slowed down, the line, the number of mentions on a monthly basis has gone down quite a bit. So this really ultimately is a metric that when you're looking at how do I show whether or not the social media programs that you're running on their behalf or that we're helping you run for your clients is working, is to show that here are the actions and activities and things that are being talked about out on these various social media sites.
And Chad, we've got a few questions coming in here. This might be a good time to take them. The first one is, how many social networks can we track at once with what you're showing?
So this particular, this one actually is going to pull back information. I don't have the whole list, so Adam, you may need to help me a little bit, but I know for sure the ones I see most often are Twitter, Facebook, stumble upon Reddit, the Google blog results, and Adam, is there what other ones do we see quite often there?
Oh, geez, those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head as well.
Yeah.
I can post a blog post with a complete list if anyone's interested after the webinar.
But we're basically, what we're doing is what we're pulling back is we're taking that search phrase, and then we're going out and we're looking for that across this group of different sites, and we're pulling that back and bringing it in. So it's not necessarily going and checking just Twitter or just Facebook. It's a sort of consolidated view of everything that's happening, and we're bringing it back and posting it here.
Great. Another question here. Do you guys do white label social media work in addition to the tracking you're showing? And if you do, how do you handle communication with our clients?
Yeah, we do it, and here's what we typically do is we're actually been working on this quite a bit recently to streamline that, and we're have some feature ideas in mind to make it even more streamlined. But we do social. We do provide outsourced or private labeled social media services that we would do on behalf of you for your clients. Typically, what we're doing is there's initially a kickoff meeting where we do have a phone call with the client, and we walk through. It depends. Sometimes some of the clients actually it's the kickoff call with the reseller because they've already had all the information sort of collected. And in some cases, we're going to the client, and we basically do pull together that information. What things we want to be talking about, what we don't want to be talking about. We just sort of say we work on your team, and then we basically use that information to execute the social media plan. We can send out alerts using your branding to the clients, and they then have the ability to review and see what's going on as they would if they had logged into your private label dashboard. So we're working on a few pieces to allow updates and approval back and forth between us and the end client on your behalf, but everything else would work very similar to the way it does with SEO or any of our other services. And Adam, do you want to add anything to that?
And I know that, well, sure. I know the resellers are always worried about that initial meeting and how things will go and the white labeling, but really it hasn't been much of a problem. The scheduling and coordination is done through the reseller. So you're telling the client, hey, we're going to do the kickoff for your social media campaign next Tuesday at 2 p.m. I'll have my analyst call you. And so when our social media analyst calls, they say, hi, I'm calling for the social media kickoff call, and whoever answers there is great. Let's get started. And it's really rare for them to interrogate, hey, who are you and who do you work for? As you can imagine, it's all just a very natural flow. But we do make sure our analyst is given instructions that if that does come up, they have answers saying, well, I'm part of the team for XYZ reseller, and they represent themselves as part of the team, and if they ever got pushed further, they'd say I'm a freelancer. So, but that's never really been a problem. So I think Chad's right. We have a little more work to do on how to streamline communications because we'd like to leverage the system a little more. Some people are asking for approval of tweets and blog posts before they go out, and we don't have the facilities for that today, so we're working on that. I think we actually have a development meeting on it tomorrow, Chad. Another question for you here, and then we'll let you move off the social media monitoring slide, is can I get this tracking only even without buying an SEO or PPC campaign?
Yes, you can. So you can use our service as a reporting only tool. Everything I've gone through, you can use as a reporting only. The only place where there is an extra charge is with the phone tracking, and there, as part of our price sheet, there's basically a charge for the monthly charge for a local phone number and for a long distance phone number, and then the per minute charge. But other than that, everything else is included along with our standard reporting only service.
And we should probably add, Chad, that we have some aggressive discounts on the pricing for that. We had a phone call earlier today from a reseller who is interested in 50 of these reporting onlys, and we do have a very aggressive discount process for that, so ask your account manager about it. It's a great way to onboard someone who's just thinking about services, get them into the dashboard, get them tracking, and then use that data to upsell. That works time and time again. We highly encourage you to do it.
Okay, Well, I was going to quickly jump over into the dashboard and at least walk through some of the places that we've just talked about in the setup. So if we go back to the beginning with Google Analytics, what I mentioned is that we show visitor information on the Home tab and also the non-branded organic traffic here on the Home tab as well. So all of this information is coming directly from Google Analytics, and what we're doing is by having this information, we can sort of analyze it in our way by, for example, using the non-brand organic traffic. We can filter out certain things that aren't standard filters in Google Analytics. And also for a lot of you who have used Google Analytics, what we've really tried to do is to simplify here and to pick the most important metrics that a client might want to see. So a trend of traffic is a big one, or non-brand organic traffic trends. But a lot of you have said, well, can you add filters or can you dig in more at a more granular level to some of the data that's in Google Analytics? And generally what we're saying is, look, this is not a replacement for Google Analytics. You still want Google Analytics if you ever need to go in and analyze content, how much time people are spending on different pieces of content on your website, or very analytical looks at time on site based on entry paths and whatnot. That's still, you're going to go into Google Analytics to do, but when you want that summary view, the executive summary that your client's going to look at, this is really what we're trying to do here in HubShout. The other place we're using Google Analytics information is on the SEO tab. So again, this graph is very similar to the one on the Home tab, but rather than organic and non-organic traffic, we're inside just organic traffic, and we're breaking out non-branded and branded organic visits. So that's what this information is here. And then this is one of my favorite charts, which is where is basically top traffic. And so one of the cool things we can do here is, because we know what your target keywords are, so we know one of your target keywords is vet websites. We also know from Google Analytics that you've gotten 24 visits from that in the last 30 days. We actually can underline that, that keyword to say, hey, this is actually one of your target phrases. Now, vet marketing is not one of our target phrases. So this one might be interesting to know, where do we rank on vet marketing, or to consider maybe adding that in as a target keyword if it was below the fold. So this is a good way of marrying up your target keywords from your SEO campaign with the actual traffic from Google Analytics. And then you can click through to details to get a full view of all the keywords, of the top keywords in the campaign. Okay, the next thing we talked about was around phone tracking and lead tracking. Just want to show you where that information is here. And okay, so what I'm looking at now is our lead tracking tab under sales. So some of these leads are older, but you have the ability to see here the lead information, whether it's active or inactive, and that requires a review of the lead. But this is one way that you can go in and filter out leads that were good leads or leads that weren't good leads, and actually be able to track the progress. And you can click through on each of these, and you can look at the details, including any notes that come through and where that is. So that's the sales tab. Phone tracking gives you a list of all the phone numbers, all the phone calls that have come in, and the ability to listen to those phone calls. So let's take a look at that. Okay, actually, I think this particular account, so then here's an example of phone calls that come in and which campaign they came from. So you can see that these phone calls came from a pay-per-click campaign, and you have the ability to listen to each of them. Now, we talked about the email to lead feature, and just to go through and look at a list really fast here. So you have the ability to create an email list, and then inside each list you have the ability to pick up the web to lead form code right here. So once you put in a web to lead form code, you can click get code, and then this code can be cut and pasted onto the website, and then anytime someone puts in their name and email address, it's going to be automatically added to this email list, which if you then had either an autoresponder, they would be enrolled in the autoresponder, so that the next day we start sending out emails to them per the way the autoresponder is set up. Or if you wanted just to collect those into a monthly newsletter email list, you could then once a month go in and build your newsletter and send it to everyone on this list. Okay, so that's gets us there. Then the other place that we talked about was social. So again, you can see here on the social media tab that we're searching every day for the term vet hubs. And I think one of the things we've seen a lot of times is that when you have very general names, you have to be a little careful. So sometimes if it's basically something like Main Street drugstore, there's a lot of Main Streets, a lot of drugstores, you might need to actually include their URL or their name on Twitter so that we can exclude a lot of false positive matches on that. But in this case, Vet Hubs is a pretty unique name. No one else uses that name, and we're able to get a pretty clean list here of mentions across social media. I'm sure all of you guys have had that issue as you've looked at tracking social media, that it's a lot easier to track social media when the name is unique and not sort of generic where lots of people are using it for in lots of different markets in different ways. So we look for Vet Hubs, we pull that information in, and it comes back on this page here. The one thing that I don't have to show is on the paid search side is the conversion tracking, and that's something that, again, if you are running pay-per-click with us, one of our paid search analysts, one of their jobs early on in the campaign setup is to look at the website and identify what we're trying to track. So a lot of that is collected as part of our onboarding process, but then we do a review and make sure we understand what we're trying to track, and then we provide instructions back to typically the reseller to say, hey, we need to make these changes to the website in order to better track, to be able to track what you want to be able to track. So typically with pay-per-click, it's a lead completion, or it's a newsletter sign up, or it's an e-commerce sale. So we're going to provide some instructions on that. But that information is then important because it comes back in on the pay-per-click tab when you're looking at how many conversions did we get from a certain keyword or a certain campaign. So that is a quick review. Now I'm just going to take a minute to look at the admin tab and show you a few things here around setup. So one thing is, in this case, we have Google Analytics is set up and actually active. If this was inactive, you would see next to it a little link that would say, please add the following name to the profile ID that you want to use. So that's something typically the account manager is helping you set up, but we do have some resellers who know how to do it. They can go in and grab that information, plug it into the profile name, grant our Google Analytics account access to it, and then we can pull the data in. So that's the setup there. On the Advanced tab, you'll see the place where you configure the branded keywords. So typically what we recommend is look at Google Analytics, take a look at all the keywords, see in the first page or two ones that are the company's name, and figure out how do you isolate that. Again, pretty easy here. It's Vet Hub. Sometimes it's a little harder, but generally speaking, you find that branded keyword consistent term, plug that in here. If there's 2 or 3, you can actually do it. You can put commas and then put 2 or 3 different flavors of the brand name. And then the other part below it is the social monitoring queue. Again, this can be something that is general. You want to be as specific as possible. If you have a name that happens to be pretty unique, you can just use the name. Sometimes we actually do have to use website URLs because it's the name of the company is so general, or general enough that there could be quite a bit of confusion. So that's where you set that up. There's some more detailed instructions. I'm not going to spend time on it today around how to set up the web to lead service, but it does require you to create a security lead group, and that's something that, again, one of your account managers can help you set up. but you need to create a bucket for those web leads to come into, and then you associate that bucket, that group of security, that bucket with the campaign you want to show it on and what report you want to show it on by indicating that here in the lead security group. So that's pretty much the main pieces you need to be worried about setting up. So Adam, I don't know if there's any questions on this that you're seeing coming in.
I'm not, but I know there are questions out there, so you've said it, and I'll repeat it. If you're having problems with any of these things, the administration side, please call your account manager. That's why we're here, and we're eager to help you with this because we know that the more we track for your customers, the better you can retain them and the better we all do. So please reach out for help, and if you have clients that don't have every bit of what Chad's just shown you running, I think you should be asking yourself, why not? There's a pretty strong business case for both you and them to have this data at your disposal, so set it up.
Great. And I want to go back to this first graph and just again reiterate that this is not simple. Getting this down actually does require thinking about what it is you're trying to track. And usually I ask myself, I just sort of flash forward 30 days to my first meeting with the client. And I've had enough of these meetings to know generally what kind of questions they're going to have. So I usually ask myself, what are they going to be asking 30 days from now? What are they going to be measuring? And I need to make sure that starting on day one, if I can get it done on day one, great. But I definitely need it done by the end of the first 30 days because I don't want to be caught sort of without really having the answer or being able to talk about what we're doing to be able to answer the question. So I always say, like, when you start these campaigns, let's be right up front thinking about, getting all the tracking in place as quickly as possible and not letting it linger over lots of time because it only gets harder to get set up, and then you've lost a lot of baseline information because clearly what you want to be able to show is the trend line. And if you didn't get the trend line, if you didn't get the baseline set up until 30 days into the campaign or 60 days into the campaign, then when they come to you and say, well, how am I doing? And you say, well, I don't know, but this month we see that you had 100 organic visitors. If they had 0 the first month or 5 the first month and they've gone to 100, that's a big piece of information that you've lost. So please make sure you talk to the account managers and get this stuff set up as quickly as possible. It really does make the difference, not only in helping prove the return on investment to your customers, but making your life easier, because one of the things we've done is try to put this all in one place. So the more you can use what we've done by putting it all in one place, the more streamlined you guys can be in terms of answering clients' questions and getting them and providing the service that I think we all want to be able to provide.
That's really excellent advice. I think, Chad, there's probably a certain euphoria when you first close a deal. We always get excited, so it's probably easy to sit back a little bit. Oh, I just closed the deal, got some time, got some cushion. But if I hear what you're saying don't let the grass grow under your feet there. Get ready for that conversation that is coming between 30 and 90 days out that says, prove it to me, this thing's working. And you're saying here the answer is measurement, and you can only have measurement if you have tracking. It kind of reminds me when I was starting my career at Verizon, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? They say that all big companies, but I was told that early in my career, and I think the vice president told me that. I would actually be quite proud of your picture here. It's pretty cool.
Well, it's using the default clip art from PowerPoint, but I think it gets the point across. So, well, I don't have anything else. I think we've got about 10 minutes here. Any last minute questions, Adam, that came in?
No, I think we hit them all, but I'll just plug it one more time. This is an awesome picture, and if you could implement this for your client, that alone is so difficult to do. They probably stay with you just because you pulled all that off, and they've probably tried some of these things and had failure in the past. But then once the intelligence starts to emerge out of all these connections and the system we've put together, then you've really got it for a long time.
Right, and I think one of the things that the more we can build in that baseline on that, I mean, we have a long list of ideas we would like to do to start as we pull in the basic data. The real value comes in as we integrate the information. We can start to overlay it and be able to identify relationships. And one of the ones that I showed you earlier was in that traffic chart, being able to say, look, are you surprised that the top traffic keywords are also your target keywords? That says something, right? I mean, that says that hey, you picked the right keywords, and I probably could look at the trend on those keywords and see that I didn't used to get much traffic off of them, and now I am getting traffic. That's the kind of stuff that I've pulled these charts together myself using Excel, going to Google Analytics, then going and running ranking trackers, keeping track of where something ranked, and trying to make this, pull this information together. It's hours of time to get this stuff actually put together. We're doing it for you right on the fly all the time. So this is really, I think, where you're going to be able to show all of the people, all your potential clients, that you're doing something more than what the guy doing it on pen and paper can do. So, with that, I'd say thanks for attending today, and we'll get this up and posted on the website by 11 a.m. tomorrow. And we should be scheduling, you should be getting another invite to the next webinar, which should happen in about 2 weeks. And we look forward to having you on that webinar as well.
Likewise, yeah, have a great afternoon, and let's do it again. It was a real pleasure. See ya.
Thanks.